For 26 years, I lived in the shadow of my parents' favoritism, ignored, dismissed, and left to fight for love I could never earn. But one letter, left on my hospital bed after nearly dying, shattered everything. It wasn't just a goodbye to them. It was the moment I discovered my worth, set unbreakable boundaries, and finally took control of my life. This is my journey from neglect to self-respect, and the family I chose to create. My name is Sophia and I am 26 years old. I never imagined I would wake up one morning in a hospital bed, fighting for my life while my parents decided that my sister Victoria's dog was more important than my well-being. I had been sick before many times, but this time felt different, heavier, darker, as if my body and my life had reached a breaking point. That night, my parents told the doctors they could not come. They had an excuse about Victoria walking her dog, as if the fragile creature demanded more attention than the daughter lying helpless in a sterile white room. Even when the doctor warned them that the night might be my last, they did not show up. This had happened before. I had spent my entire life being overlooked, being invisible in a house where love and attention were allocated as if they were currency, and I was bankrupt. Yet in the depths of despair, I decided this would be the last time I would allow them to determine my worth. It would be the last time I sacrificed my health, my emotions, and my existence in a futile attempt to earn their approval. Before I continue, I should tell you about the letter I left behind, a letter that changed the course of my life forever. But first, I want you to understand where I came from and why this moment felt like both a shattering defeat and the beginning of something inevitable. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania, in a house that from the outside looked perfect, with white picket fences, neatly trimmed hedges, and a lawn that glistened after every rain. From the moment anyone passed by, the Wilson family seemed to live a charmed life. But the truth inside those walls was different. My parents, Harold and Diana Wilson, had 2 daughters. I was the oldest, and Victoria came along 3 years later. From her first day, it was clear that something invisible but crucial set us apart. Their attention, their love, their energy were always directed towards Victoria, even when she had done nothing to earn it. When I was 7, I won first place in the school science fair. My project had consumed weeks of evenings filled with calculations, experiments, and sleepless nights. I had rushed home to show my parents, ribbon in hand, heart bursting with pride. Their response was a quick pat on the head, a polite nod, and then a shift in attention to Victoria, who was learning to ride her bike without training wheels. I remember telling myself it made sense. Riding a bike was a bigger milestone than a science project, at least in the universe my parents lived in. By the time I was 12, I had grown used to this pattern. Straight A's on my report card merited a polite nod, while Victoria's B- in art was met with full-blown excitement and photographs on the refrigerator. When I qualified for the state swimming championships, my father claimed he was proud but could not attend because Victoria had a minor cold. I became an expert at rationalizing their behavior, convincing myself that they had their reasons, that my independence made their attention unnecessary. Health complications added layers to the imbalance. At 16, I was diagnosed with a severe autoimmune disorder that required strict medication, careful monitoring, and avoidance of triggers. Certain foods, stress, and particularly animal dander could send my body into crisis. Yet my parents treated my condition as inconvenient, as if their love and concern were limited by the amount of trouble I caused. Appointments were met with sighs, flare-ups with complaints about medical bills. Meanwhile, Victoria thrived, healthy and energetic, excelling in soccer, appearing effortlessly confident, never facing a body that rebelled against her existence. My parents attended every game, cheered her on with handmade banners and prideful faces, while I sat beside them, battling nausea, fatigue, or wheezing, quietly absorbing the lesson that my suffering was less important than Victoria's joy. College brought new trials. When the time came, they declared they could only afford to support one child. My academic achievements, my scholarships, and my determination counted for nothing. Victoria, they insisted, required financial support because she was not academically inclined. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school while maintaining a perfect GPA. Victoria quit after 1 semester, stressed by expectations that seemed trivial in comparison to what I had endured. She received comfort in the form of a brand new car and continued validation that reinforced the family hierarchy. Despite the disparities, I remained hopeful that my love, my effort, my patience could bridge the gap. I graduated with honors, secured a promising career in marketing, and visited home often, always bringing gifts, thoughtful gestures, and a willingness to smooth over tensions that were not of my making. But the pattern never changed. Victoria remained the center of attention, the sun around which the family revolved. 3 months ago, the weight of the favoritism had finally pushed me to create distance. I moved 30 miles away to a small but comfortable apartment, close enough to visit but far enough to develop an independent life. Victoria stayed home, drifting through meaningless jobs and endless social engagements, relying on my parents' support. Their indulgence escalated when Victoria decided she wanted a dog, an expensive Samoyed, Snowball, despite knowing my severe allergies. They bought the dog, paid for accessories, and converted a home office into a luxurious space just for him. My warnings about my health were ignored, my discomfort dismissed. That night at the family dinner, I tried to navigate the toxicity with grace, to hold on to hope for connection. But Snowball's arrival marked the beginning of another chapter in the familiar pattern of invisibility. The evening began deceptively well. My mother greeted me warmly, her arms enveloping me in a hug that smelled faintly of lavender, a scent meant to soothe. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they had noticed my absence. Maybe they truly cared. But when I heard the bark, the insistent, enthusiastic bark, my hope began to unravel. Snowball, the creature that symbolized Victoria's complete ascendancy in their hearts, had arrived that morning. My mother insisted I would be fine. My father beamed as if my discomfort was a small inconvenience, and Victoria lounged on the couch obliviously, her fingers scrolling through her phone. I tried to breathe shallowly, medicating myself, willing my body to cooperate. Dinner commenced, yet the conversation revolved entirely around Victoria and her dog. Every anecdote, every moment of humor, every shared memory centered on Snowball, while my words, my achievements, my presence were ignored or politely acknowledged before being dismissed. By dessert, my body rebelled. Hives spread across my skin, my breathing tightened, and my eyes watered. I excused myself to the bathroom to administer additional medication, whispering reassurances to the reflection staring back at me. Keep going. Hold it together. This is only a few hours. But the reflection did not lie. I was exhausted, diminished, invisible. Victoria glanced at me, noted my condition with shallow concern, and offered empty advice. Pop a Benadryl and chill out. The family dynamic was a cycle I had memorized but never managed to endure without cost. Driving home, the air conditioning on high, I felt my body betray me. Breathing shallow, hives inflamed, chest tight, I stopped at a pharmacy and took extra antihistamines, aware that relief was temporary. At my apartment, I used my nebulizer, cooled my skin, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the quiet voice inside whispering a truth I had spent 26 years avoiding. They understood perfectly well. They just did not care. 3 days later, I awoke feeling as if a truck had parked on my chest. Pain, dizziness, burning skin, nausea. I attempted to rise and failed, clinging to the edges of my reality. My phone called out to my doctor, messages left in haste, detailing exposure and escalating symptoms. Work could not be missed. Presentations could not be postponed. I forced myself into the world, each step a testament to years of pushing through pain and invisibility. At the office, my colleague Natalie intercepted me. Her concern immediate, tangible. Your health is more important than any meeting, she insisted. And I, exhausted and stubborn, acquiesced to her care. This moment, this confrontation between my body, my family, and my will, was only the beginning. I did not yet realize that this allergic reaction, this repeated neglect, would become the catalyst that forced me to confront everything about my family, my independence, and the life I wanted to live. What began as a minor incident had already begun spiraling into something irreversible, a chain of events that would demand choices I had never imagined making. Natalie looked skeptical but returned to her desk after extracting a promise that I would keep her updated. I called my doctor's office again and was put through to the nurse. After describing my symptoms, she told me in no uncertain terms to go to the emergency room immediately. "This sounds like it could be developing into anaphylaxis," she explained. "With your history, we cannot take chances. You need to be seen right away." I hung up and sat there, staring blankly at my phone, contemplating my options. Part of me still wanted to stay for the presentation, to prove I could push through anything. But another part, the rational part that had been silenced so often, knew this was serious. I gathered my things and approached Natalie's desk. The nurse said I should go to the ER. "Could you let Brian know I will not make the presentation?" asked, my voice weak. "Of course," she said, already reaching for her purse. "I am driving you. You should not be alone right now." I tried to protest, but she was insistent. And honestly, I was relieved. As my condition had deteriorated throughout the morning, a growing sense of fear had been building inside me. Something was very wrong, and the thought of facing it alone was terrifying. As Natalie drove me to the hospital, I decided to call my parents. Despite everything, they were my family, and a small part of me still hoped that in a true emergency they would be there for me. The call went to voicemail. I left a brief message explaining that I was having a severe reaction and heading to the hospital. I tried to keep my voice steady, not wanting to sound dramatic, but also hoping they would understand the seriousness of the situation. Next, I tried calling Victoria, thinking she might be able to reach our parents if they were not answering their phones. "Hey, what is up?" she answered, the sound of her dog barking loudly in the background. "Victoria, I am having a really bad reaction," I explained, my voice growing weaker. "I am on my way to the hospital. Cannot reach Mom and Dad. Could you let them know?" "Oh, that sucks," she said, sounding distracted. "Snowball, stop that." "Sorry, he is trying to eat my shoes," she continued. "Yeah, I will tell them when I see them. They are taking me and Snowball to that new dog park today." "Victoria, this is serious," I emphasized. "I need them to know I am going to the hospital now." "Okay, babe. I will text them. Got to go. Snowball is destroying my favorite sneakers. Feel better." And with that, she hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Even now, with me heading to the emergency room, Victoria and her dog remained the priority. I slumped back against the car seat, fighting tears of frustration and hurt. "Family?" Natalie asked sympathetically. "Something like that," I muttered. By the time we reached the hospital, I was struggling to stay conscious. My throat felt like it was closing, and the hives had spread to the point where my skin felt like it was on fire. Natalie helped me into the emergency room, where the triage nurse took one look at me and immediately called for assistance. What followed was a blur. I was rushed into a treatment area, given injections of epinephrine and steroids, and hooked up to various monitors. Doctors fired questions at me about my medical history, exposure to allergens, and current medications. I tried to answer as best I could, but I was fading in and out of awareness. The last clear memory I had was of calling out for my neighbor, Mrs. Garza, asking her to feed my cat. She had no connection to the hospital and was not there, but in my confused state, I was concerned about my pet being alone. Then darkness claimed me entirely. I later learned that as my condition worsened, the hospital staff had made multiple attempts to contact my parents. They had finally reached them around 6 p.m., some 4 hours after I had been admitted. The conversation, as relayed to me later by a nurse, went something like this. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, this is Mercy General Hospital. Your daughter Sophia has been admitted with a severe anaphylactic reaction. Her condition is critical, and we strongly recommend you come immediately." "Tonight, we cannot possibly come tonight," my father reportedly replied. "Our other daughter is walking her dog at that new park across town, and we need to pick her up afterward." "Sir, I do not think you understand," the nurse said firmly. "Your daughter is in critical condition. The doctors are doing everything they can, but her organs are starting to show signs of stress. Tonight might be her last night. You really should be here." There had been a pause before my mother spoke. "Well, we cannot just leave Victoria stranded with her dog. Surely Sophia will stabilize soon. We can come by tomorrow if she is still there." The nurse, shocked, could barely respond. "I will note in her chart that you were informed of her condition," she said finally before hanging up. As I drifted through varying states of consciousness, I was vaguely aware of voices around me, machines beeping, and hands gently tending to me. At one point, I opened my eyes to see a nurse holding my hand. She was older, with kind eyes and gray hair peeking out from her cap. "You hang in there, sweetheart," she said softly. "I am staying right here with you." I squeezed her hand weakly, grateful for this stranger's compassion when my own family had abandoned me once again. Throughout the night, my condition remained critical. My body was essentially at war with itself, my overactive immune system attacking my tissues in response to the prolonged allergen exposure. The medical team worked tirelessly, adjusting medications and monitoring my vital signs. By morning, I had stabilized somewhat, though I remained in the intensive care unit. The crisis had passed, but the damage, to my body and even more so to my heart, had been done. Natalie had contacted some of my other colleagues, and throughout the next day, a steady stream of coworkers and friends came to visit. They brought flowers, cards, and genuine concern. People I saw every day but had never considered close friends showed up and sat with me, sharing stories and keeping my spirits up. Not once did my parents call to check on my condition. Not once did Victoria text to see if I was still alive. As the reality of their absence sank in, something inside me finally broke. The fantasy I had clung to for 26 years, that deep down my family truly loved me, shattered completely. In its place grew a strange sense of clarity. For the first time I saw my family exactly as they were, not as I wished them to be. With that clarity came the beginning of a plan. The letter that would change everything. The first 72 hours in the hospital remain mostly a blur in my memory. I have flashes of consciousness, the cold rush of medication entering my veins through the constant beeping of monitors, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors, and the persistent feeling that I was drowning despite the oxygen mask covering my face. What I remember with perfect clarity, however, is the moment I fully regained consciousness and realized no one from my family was there. I opened my eyes to the sterile white ceiling of the intensive care unit and turned my head, half expecting, against all reason, to see my mother in the chair beside the bed. Instead, there was a young nurse checking my vitals. "Welcome back," she said with a warm smile. "You gave us quite a scare." "My parents?" I asked, my voice a painful rasp. Her smile faltered slightly. "I do not believe they have been in yet. Would you like me to try calling them again?" That was when the full reality hit me. I had nearly died, and my parents had chosen not to come because Victoria needed help with her dog. I had known they favored her, but some part of me had always believed that in a true life-or-death situation, they would be there for me too. That belief had been the last thread holding together my image of us as a real family. Now that thread had snapped. "No," I said after a long moment. "Do not call them." The nurse, whose name badge read Ellie, seemed to understand something of what I was feeling. She gently patted my hand. "You have had other visitors, though. A woman named Natalie has been here every day, and several other friends have stopped by. They have been very concerned about you." I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Colleagues and casual friends had shown more care for me than my parents. The contrast was both heartbreaking and illuminating. The weeks following my hospitalization were focused on both physical and emotional recovery. Dr. Rivera had prescribed a new medication regimen that required careful monitoring, and Natalie helped me keep track of the various pills and injections. As my body slowly healed, my mind began the equally important process of healing from decades of emotional neglect. The letter I had left for my parents had been a watershed moment, a clear line drawn between the person I had been, desperate for their approval, and the person I was becoming, someone determined to value herself even if they never would. Each word in that letter was a release of pain I had carried for too long. Dear Mom and Dad, by the time you read this, I will have been discharged from the hospital where I spent a week fighting for my life. The doctors called you the first night and told you I might not survive until morning. You chose not to come because Victoria needed help walking her dog. This was not the first time you have chosen Victoria over me. It has been the pattern of our family since my earliest memories. For 26 years, I have made excuses for your behavior. I have told myself that Victoria needed you more, that I was stronger and more independent, that someday you would see me and value me equally. I nearly died waiting for that day to come. I do not write this letter out of anger, though I have every right to be angry. I write it from a place of clarity and self-preservation. I can no longer participate in a family dynamic that consistently places my needs, my accomplishments, and even my life below those of my sister and now her dog. From this point forward, I am stepping back from our relationship. I need time and space to heal, not just from this most recent health crisis, but from the lifelong pattern of being treated as less than. I will not be contacting you for the foreseeable future, and I ask that you respect my decision by not attempting to contact me either. If at some point you are genuinely interested in building a healthier relationship, one based on mutual respect and equal consideration, then we can revisit this decision. That would require acknowledgement of the harm that has been done and a commitment to change on your part. I do not hold out much hope for this outcome, but I leave the door unlocked rather than sealed shut. Not for your sake but for mine. Because, despite everything, letting go of the dream of having parents who truly see and value me is the hardest thing I have ever done. I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing it to save myself. Sophia. I had no way of knowing how they had reacted upon reading the letter. Part of me expected frantic phone calls or a sudden visit, but there was nothing, complete silence, which in its way was the most telling response. A week after my discharge, I began seeing a therapist named Lydia, whom Dr. Rivera had recommended. Our first session focused on the immediate trauma of my health crisis and family abandonment, but over time, we began addressing the patterns that had shaped my life. You are describing a classic golden child, scapegoat dynamic, Lydia explained during our third session. Families with this pattern elevate one child, the golden child, while the scapegoat becomes the target for all negative projections. Why? I asked. What did I ever do to deserve being the scapegoat? Nothing, Lydia said firmly. This has nothing to do with anything you did. It develops from the parents' unresolved issues. The golden child validates their importance. The more independent child threatens it. That's why they need someone to constantly seek approval that will never come. Her words struck a deep chord. My achievements, independence, and self-sufficiency, once my greatest strengths, had been the very reasons I had been marginalized. You grieve, she continued. Acknowledge the parents you deserved but never had. Feel the anger, the sadness, the loss. And then gradually build a life based on your values, rather than on the hope of approval that will never come. Those sessions became the foundation of my healing process. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions about my family without dismissing them or making excuses. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I returned to my apartment. Mrs. Garza welcomed me home with homemade soup and updates about my cat, who had taken to visiting her every afternoon. He has decided we are family now, she said with a chuckle. Perhaps family was not defined by blood or legal ties, but by who showed up when it mattered. I made practical changes to protect myself. High-quality air purifiers, updated emergency contacts, removing my parents and adding Natalie. And changing my medical directive to specify that my parents should not be consulted for medical decisions. 3 weeks after discharge, I returned to work. My colleagues welcomed me warmly, and my supervisor Brian reassured me that my position had been secure during my absence. Their care and consideration contrasted sharply with my family's neglect. Victoria texted once casually. Hey, how are you feeling? As if I'd experienced a minor cold rather than a life-threatening medical emergency. I replied briefly and did not invite further conversation. My parents finally called 4 days after reading my letter. I let the call go to voicemail. My mother's message was dismissive. Sophia, we got your letter. I think you are being very dramatic about this whole situation. Call us when you are feeling more rational. Her words confirmed the correctness of my decision to step back. 6 days later, Victoria called unexpectedly. Mom and Dad are acting weird, she said. They won't tell me what was in your letter, but they've been fighting, and Mom keeps crying randomly. I explained the truth to her. How they had chosen not to come to the hospital even though doctors said I might die because she needed help with her dog. Another pause on the line. Finally, Victoria admitted. I did not know it was that serious. That's not your fault, I said. That's how they raised you. But I cannot be part of that dynamic anymore. It nearly killed me, literally. Are you saying you don't want to be my sister anymore? No, I said softly. I need to rebuild my relationship with myself first. I've spent my whole life trying to earn love from our parents. It left me hollow inside. I need to learn who I am when I am not desperately seeking approval. For the first time, I stood before the bathroom mirror and looked at myself. The desperate need for approval that had driven me for so long was beginning to fade, replaced by something quieter but far more powerful: self-acceptance. The day my parents finally came to the hospital to find my empty bed and letter became a pivotal moment. Ellie, the nurse who had become an ally during my stay, called to explain what had happened. They came at 3 like they said, she said. Your father seemed annoyed about the lack of a call. Your mother saw the letter and sat down, completely white. Your father's face turned red, then purple. They stayed in the room for 45 minutes, mostly silent. Their reaction suggested my words had hit home. Perhaps for the first time they were seeing our family dynamic. The silence continued until 6 days after the letter, when my parents finally called. I let the call go to voicemail, still not ready to engage. Then 2 days later, my father sent a lengthy email attempting introspection. Sophia, your letter has forced your mother and me to confront uncomfortable truths. While I do not agree with everything you wrote, I cannot deny that we have not always been as attentive as we should have been. I hope you will reconsider your decision to cut us off. Victoria misses you, and so do we. His words reflected the beginning of awareness, but stopped far short of true understanding. I forwarded the email to Lydia, and we discussed it in our next session. She observed, there's acknowledgement of the specific incident but resistance to seeing the larger pattern. He's essentially telling you that your lived experience is incorrect. I asked, should I respond? That depends entirely on what you want from this interaction, Lydia said. If you hope for full acknowledgement and change, they are not there yet. If your goal is peace and self-protection, you decide your boundaries. After careful consideration, I decided to send a brief reply to my father's email. Dad, thank you for acknowledging that you should have come to the hospital. That means something to me. However, this is not about one incident. It is about a lifelong pattern that nearly cost me my life. I need time and space to heal both physically and emotionally. I hope you can respect that. Sophia. I did not receive a reply. As the weeks passed and I settled back into my apartment and work routine, the silence from my parents continued. Victoria, however, began reaching out more frequently. Her texts evolved from casual check-ins to thoughtful inquiries about my recovery, and eventually, tentative questions about our childhood. Was it that bad for you growing up? She asked 1 month after my discharge. That was the outside, I explained. Inside, I was constantly striving to be perfect enough to finally earn Mom and Dad's attention. She paused, reflecting. Do you remember my high school graduation? I was valedictorian, but Mom and Dad left right after because I had a minor cold. I did remember, she said slowly. And your college graduation. They missed it entirely because I had a date that night and needed help choosing an outfit, I reminded her. Her voice grew small. When you put it all together like that, it does sound really bad. Our conversations were complicated. Victoria had been as much a product of our dysfunctional family as I had, yet she had benefited from it at my expense. I tried to balance honesty with understanding, knowing her awareness of our family's reality would be painful. 6 weeks after my hospital discharge, my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment. I saw them through the peephole and considered not answering, but I took a deep breath and faced them directly. I opened the door but did not invite them in. "Sophia," my mother said, voice wavering. "You look well. What are you doing here?" Asked neutrally. "We need to talk," my father said. "This has gone on long enough. You cannot just cut your family out because of one misunderstanding. This is not a good time. If you want to talk, call first and respect my boundaries," I replied calmly. "Boundaries? We are your parents. We don't need permission to see our daughter," my mother insisted. "You do. That's exactly what a boundary is. I asked for space, and showing up unannounced is disrespecting that request," I said firmly. "This is ridiculous," my father huffed. "Victoria said you have been filling her head with accusations about us. I have only told Victoria the truth about my experience. If that conflicts with your story, that's your problem," I replied. "How can you be so cold? Do you know how much you have hurt us?" my mother asked. I reminded myself not to take responsibility for their feelings. "I nearly died, Mom, alone in a hospital because you chose Victoria's dog over me. I am not responsible for your feelings about that reality." They continued pushing guilt, obligation, dismissal, and appeals to family loyalty, but something had changed in me. I was no longer desperate for approval. I understood my worth. After 15 minutes of circular conversation, I said, "I am closing the door now. Please do not come back unannounced. If you want to talk, call or email first and respect my answer if I say I am not ready." "This is not over," my father said as I closed the door. "You are right," I thought. "This is just the beginning of me valuing myself enough to set healthy boundaries. Goodbye." For the first time, I had stood my ground without guilt or desperation. That evening, Victoria texted, "Mom and Dad came home really upset. Dad keeps saying you have changed. Mom is crying. What happened?" I stood up for myself. "It's new for all of us," I replied. After a long delay, she responded, "I think I need to learn how to do that too." Those words gave me hope, not for a perfect reconciliation, but for a healthier relationship with my sister and new patterns for both of us going forward. 6 months have passed since leaving the letter on that hospital bed. I moved to a new city 40 miles from my parents for a fresh start. My company allowed a branch transfer, and my apartment has top-floor air filtration, perfect for my health needs. I have built a support system. Natalie visits every other weekend, Mrs. Garza calls weekly, and I've joined a book club and hiking group. Relationships now feel authentic, based on respect and care rather than desperate attempts to earn love. Contact with my parents is minimal. They call once a month, and I answer when emotionally ready. The calls are brief and superficial, but they no longer drain me. I have accepted that they may never provide the deep nurturing I once craved. Victoria, however, has grown remarkably. She moved into her apartment, rehomed the dog, and began understanding how the family dynamic shaped her behavior. Our monthly coffee meetings are honest and reflective. We are learning to be sisters without parental favoritism distorting our bond. Therapy with Lydia continues. Healing is not linear. Old habits resurface, but I now recognize them as echoes of the past. I have learned the true meaning of family. It is not shared DNA, but those who show up, respect boundaries, and care consistently. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. I have forgiven my parents, but I will not participate in the toxic dynamic that nearly cost me my life. Most importantly, I have realized my worth. For 26 years, I believed love had to be earned. Now I know my value was my birthright all along. The letter I left was not just a goodbye to a toxic family dynamic. It was a hello to a new life. A life where I know my worth, set healthy boundaries and choose relationships that honor rather than diminish me. If you recognize yourself in my story, know this. You deserve better. Your worth is not determined by others' recognition. Stop trying to earn love from those unable to give it freely and focus on relationships that honor your true value.